Patreon Q&A number 123. I want to thank all 123 of my incredible patrons. Guys, thank you so much. And to everyone else listening, there's going to be spoilers for all of the series I'm going to be talking about, so tread carefully. Anthony wants to know my thoughts on the theory about God actually being the monster form of Blast, and that 2 years ago, the cube somehow caused this transformation. So first of all, let me just say that I don't think Saitama and Blast were going to team up and fight God at the end of the series. That's Mastar's theory, not mine. But as for Blast being God and God being Blast, I'll say that it's certainly possible. But we just don't quite have enough information yet to really support that. And I certainly wouldn't be mad at it if it turns out that that is actually true. It would be interesting and quite the twist. But personally, I would prefer it if Blast is just like his own separate entity. You know, he's just Blast, God is God, and they're two different people. I think the story would benefit more from that aspect, you know, having like two separate storylines, because that means that Blast would have his own big moment within the series, and then, you know, God can have his own. Now, as for Blast transforming into God 2 years ago, again, certainly possible, but I feel like God is older than that. It just really seems that way. Now, I'm not gonna put too much on the table of contents picture with the Egyptian stuff, because that's the only time we've seen that stuff come up, and I don't know if that's like literally the canon or it was just a little fun that Murata was having with that drawing. We don't know yet, but it could be pointing into the direction that God exists for that long. And yes, I know that you said that the cube itself is not God, and maybe that just plays into monsterification, and that's possible too, but we just need a little more information on the stuff, which we just don't have right now. And also, going off of what my mass said about the history of the world, it was like over 100 years ago that like the wars happened and stuff, and then monsters kind of started to appear after that, or at least that's what it's implied. And also, Psychos had like that third eye vision of whatever she saw in high school, which was obviously more than 2 years ago, and I'm thinking that God had something to do with that. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that God was actually existing back then, since it is a premonition of the future, but I just think all of the information that we have right now kind of points to God being older than 2 years. And there certainly are parallels between Saitama and Blast. They've always been there, and it could be pointing towards the whole good and evil, or just the black and white elements of like absolute power within this series. But I would like to see a little more developments on the cube and God stuff before I personally start putting more faith into this theory. Boxsteam asks, if Saitama's powers were theoretically able to be given away like one for all, who do you think would deserve it the most in your view or in Saitama's view? So I think he would probably give it to Moomin Rider, right? I think the story kind of dictates that, and just the way that I view Saitama's opinion on this. But if Moomin Rider declined it, which he very possibly could, then I think Saitama might give it to King. So Saitama giving his power to King would actually make him as strong as everyone thinks that he is, and therefore he can continue to be, you know, that pillar of support for people. Chance asks, who do you think the top 5 strongest hockey users in all of One Piece are at the current moment? So I'm not gonna put them in order, but I guess you kind of have to put the Yonko in there. I think they probably fit that bill, at least until further notice. But aside from them, I mean, I guess Aki Inu would probably be up there, and then maybe Dragon, even though we haven't seen him do anything yet, but I don't know, he probably is. But I will say, if we had to put a number 1 on that list, I'll say that it's probably Shanks. In my opinion, Shanks is kind of implied to be like the ultimate hockey user. And if the Pirate Warriors game is any indication of how he fights, he's kind of similar to Roger almost, or at least what we've seen of him. Crusader deus vult asks, Awaken Garou versus the organization. So it's not looking good for the organization right now, at least if we're not being generous with the speculation, because we actually just saw Destro go against Metal Bat, and I'll say that Destro seems like a solid dragon. Not an above dragon, you know, like the way that Awaken Garou is, and Eraman is probably on a similar level possibly. And then all of the G robots that we've seen are like demons, and then the one G6 Machine God Mirror was a dragon. But again, that's still not enough. So it ultimately comes down to how strong Drive Knight truly is. So if like his King form makes him above Dragon, then they would have a good chance of taking him down. But the Drive Knight that we saw against Neon, I think it would probably just play out the same way that the S-Class heroes going against Awaken Garou did. And then your second question, do you think Saitama will end up with Tatsumaki? I'm really unsure where the romance is headed in this series. I really wouldn't be surprised if it just goes nowhere and there's just no romance at all. Like, no characters get together. I mean, that's very possible. But also, I mean, I think if Saitama does wind up with someone, I guess it would have to be Fubuki, right? I mean, I think Fubuki would probably be the best candidate for that. But I guess it's also possible that it could be Tatsumaki. Delamante asks, how do you think a fight between Todo and Fushiguro would go if they were both going all out based on current manga feats and implied potential? So I think it would probably be pretty competitive, right? I mean, if Fushiguro used like the Chimera Shadow Garden, then I guess Todo would use like a simple domain to counteract against that. And then maybe Todo might actually have like a slight advantage here because of his Boogie Woogie Clap technique, because then he can maybe even use the Shikigami that is a part of that domain to his advantage possibly. But either way, I think this would be a pretty good fight. But if Fushiguro decides to summon like Maharaga, then it's over. I don't see Todo being able to take him down. Beowolf asks, do you think Suiko and Saitama are going to date? So I personally think that little sequence was maybe just a little funny moment. I don't really see that going anywhere. I mean, I could be wrong, but like I've already talked about in this Q&A, I'm just so unsure about romance in this series, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if no romances ever flesh out, and there's always gonna just kind of be that will they, won't they thing going on. And then for your second question, what are my thoughts on Fuzzy? So the first impressions that I got from him seems like he's maybe not like full-blown evil. It seems like he might feel that he's doing the right thing, you know, with whatever he's doing, which probably ties into the prophecy to some extent. So I assume that him getting the Neo Heroes together is a similar thing to what Sitch was doing, but I don't think he's knowingly like in cahoots with the organization. I'm sure he's oblivious to the fact that they have infiltrated. And the whole cyborg thing, I think he thinks that that's probably the right thing to do because he says it's like correcting harmful thoughts or whatever he says. So I don't think he's necessarily evil, but can be perceived that way. Geruda asks, do you think at some point Shigaraki and Deku will have to work together, perhaps to defeat All For One before fighting each other? Yeah, I think that's very likely at this point, or at least something like that will happen. I mean, it's certainly shifting in that direction, right? All For One is taking over. You know, he's using Shigaraki more than ever right now. And the whole thing about Deku saying you look like somebody that needed to be saved, so it's very possible that that may happen, but I do think they'll also wind up fighting each other regardless. L asks, who do you think could take a direct strike from a serious punch from Saitama? So off the top of my head, probably an Angel from Dragon Ball Super. If not them, then probably the Grand Priest or something like that. But aside from that, you know, just pick like any strong Marvel or DC character. I'm sure they could. Legendarius asks, I would keep your eyes peeled for a camera in your office. Metal Knight might be watching. So my FBI agent didn't tell me that anyone else was surveilling me, so I think I'm good for now, unless Metal Knight is able to surpass even the FBI agent possibly. And then your second question, will Saitama ever not be a penny pincher? I don't think so. Even if he was rich or whatever, I still think he would probably, you know, have that trait to him. I think it's, you know, it makes up a part of his character that he probably won't lose. Little Ferrari asks, how far do you see the Survey Corps from Attack on Titan making it in the One Punch Man world? I can honestly see Levi taking down some lower or even mid demons based on how crazy he is on Attack on Titan. Yeah, I think they probably could. I mean, if the Hunters, along with Excel, are able to take down demons, I don't see why the Survey Corps wouldn't be able to, especially if they had like the upgraded gear from the One Punch Man world. Mr.Awsome asks, so who are all of the S-Class heroes that you believe are at, near, or past their prime? So it's really hard to say with most, but I'll give you 5 significant ones. So Bang is obviously past his prime. Flashy Flash seems to be near it, or maybe even at it. I mean, he's so ridiculously powerful right now. Darkshine seems to be in his prime, but I'm sure he's probably going to have some kind of power up soon in the webcomic. Tatsumaki seems to be definitely near her prime, possibly. And then Atomic Samurai, I think it's safe to say that he's in his prime right now. And then for your second question, what if a lesser man of similar size wore the super tight tank top, like Great Philosopher, for example? Well, I think it ultimately comes down to if Great Philosopher truly believes in the power of the tank top. I'm thinking that's where this comes from. It seems like it's a placebo effect. I mean, maybe there is some kind of mythical or magic or supernatural ability to the tank top that Tank Top Master taps into. But until further notice, I think it's more of the power of belief, if anything. Natedawg asks, what if a way to fix Eri and Aizawa is Eri rewinds Aizawa but erases his quirk in the process? And this puts a limit on how Eri can use her powers. So in order for her to do that, she would have to rewind Aizawa to the point of where he was like 4 years old or 3 years old or something before his quirk manifested. She can't just erase someone's quirk factor, or at least it hasn't been pointed out that she's able to do that. And I don't think Aizawa is overpowered. I think he's being used just right within the story. I do think that somebody like him should exist, but the way that he is utilized by Horikoshi, I don't think is problematic at all. But I'm really unsure where he goes in the future of the story. I think he'll be limited regardless because of his handicap at the moment. And as for Eri being limited, I think she is limited right now because of the stipulations behind her quirk. She needs to accumulate time energy or whatever and make her horn grow. So that puts a hard time limit on her ability to use it and not really spam it, you know what I mean? Nico L asks, what do you think about the idea that Blue is a clone of Blast, like in Star Wars with how Django and Boba are clones? I mean, it's certainly possible. There's a lot of unknowns with Blue right now. We don't really know the circumstances around him being the son of Blast. We don't know who the mother is. We don't know how it happened. So, you know, maybe he's a clone, but then that raises a whole bunch of other questions. It's like, how did he become a clone? Why did he become a clone? Who did it? I would say we're probably gonna have to wait on this stuff before we have any evidence to support this theory, which we just really don't have right now. 8-Bit asks, how do you think Mob would do in a battle against Tatsumaki? So I honestly don't know. I haven't finished Mob Psycho yet. I haven't read the manga, so I'm only up to season 2, meaning I don't know all of Mob's feats yet. But I can tell you what one said, the guy who created both of these characters. He said that Tatsumaki would usually win, but when Mob gets serious, probably meaning his question mark percentage mode, then he doesn't know. So I take that as maybe he doesn't even really know himself. Sean H asks, I was wondering if episode 3 of WandaVision changed your mind about the show. So it kind of did. It definitely made me more interested in it than the first 2 episodes did. And even if the series winds up becoming incredible, it's not really gonna change my mind about the first 2 episodes not being good. Like, I was always kind of interested in it, and I know where it's headed because I've seen the trailer. But I will say that episode 3 certainly made me more interested in the series than I ever have been, especially the end of the episode. It started to make me think that like Wanda wants to be there and that this is possibly like her doing. The compound around that might just be keeping that under control. I don't think they like made that or forced her into it. And yes, I am aware of House of M, and it has something to do with her like having like a mental breakdown to some extent. So I'm thinking, you know, that's probably what's happening here. Like she snapped or something and then formed like this reality bubble around her, and SHIELD possibly, or SWORD, the analog to SHIELD, is possibly trying to keep that contained. snowpeas asks, what do you think the next arc after the Neo Heroes would be? So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it's the final arc of the series. I don't want it to be, but it just seems like this arc might be wrapping up all of the other prevalent storylines within the series that isn't like the final one relating to God. And of course, I could be wrong. One is just pulling storylines out of nowhere, which I love. It just, you know, it means that this isn't such a paint-by-number series and that anything could happen. But it seems like the Neo Heroes arc is going to go on for much longer at this point. I mean, there's still a lot that needs to happen. So I really wouldn't be surprised if the next arc is just the last one, and that's also a really long arc, probably. The Skinny Giraffe asks, would you eat the jacket fruit? No, that seems like a terrible fruit to eat in my opinion. And then which Zoan type fruit would you eat, excluding ancient and mythicals? I like that you put those stipulations because you know that the ancient and mythicals are the most interesting ones. So I really don't want to eat any of the Zoan fruits that aren't ancient or mythical, but if I had to, I'd either eat like one of the bird Zoans, so at least I could fly, or the human fruit, you know, the one that Chopper ate, because Oda said that like it wouldn't do anything if a human ate it, but they may become enlightened, so that would be interesting. Water Bottle asks, do you prefer the webcomic design of Blast or the manga design? So I like the manga design better if I had to absolutely choose, but like you, I do have somewhat of an issue with the Blast nameplate bubble thing because it just doesn't seem like Blast as a character, or at least what we know of him, would really put that on his chest, you know, considering that it's like a hobby to him and apparently he hates being in the spotlight. It seems like he wouldn't have like a vanity piece like that on his costume, you know? But also it could just be one in Murata trying to have more parallels to Superman. You know how like Superman has the Kryptonian S on his chest? I guess this is like Blast's equivalent of that possibly. Fire54 asked, do you think Suiko might become a possible love interest of Saitama? I don't think so. I talked about this before, but I think that was mainly just a joke, little throwaway sequence. I don't see that going anywhere. And like I've also said, I'm just really unsure where the romance in this series is going, period. I wouldn't be surprised if there is never any real romance and there's just always like the what could be element of it, maybe. And then for your second question, if the multi-cube theory is real, do you think other people might have them? So yeah, it's possible. I mean, I guess Blast probably still has the cube that he had. I mean, until further notice, we're led to believe that I guess he still has it. I don't think the organization has one because they've never talked about it and there's never been any kind of evidence to show that they do have one. But as for the Monster Association mining, it's very possible that they were looking for the cube, but again, Psychos never talked about it, so I don't know at this point, but it's very likely they were looking for the cube. Psycho seems to know a lot about the, you know, the finer details of the One Punch Man world, so I wouldn't be surprised if she was aware of its existence. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video today, guys. Once again, I want to thank all 123 of my incredible patrons. And to everyone else, if you would like to be in next week's Q&A, simply check out the Patreon page. The $5 tier will give you access to this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.